I remember the exact moment. It was a sunny Sunday, the kind that makes families gather and pretend everything is perfect. We were at brunch, laughter bouncing off the walls, the smell of cinnamon and eggs filling the air. I was pouring myself some coffee when I heard him. My brother, laughing with his friends, casual, careless, sharp. "She sets just the ant," he said. I froze mid-pour. The coffee dripped from the pot, landed on the counter. I didn't notice. The words hit me harder than a punch. Just the ant. That's all I was to him. Just a title. A footnote in his life. I swallowed. Hard. "You, what?" I asked. My voice barely above a whisper, though my heart was screaming. He laughed again, like it was funny. I said, "She steps just the ant. Come on. Don't step overthink it." Overthink it? Overthink it? I had given him years of my life. Nights spent comforting him after breakups. Hours lost helping him with his career. My own heart bruised and battered while I patched up his. And he reduced me to just a title. I smiled. A small, calm, infuriating smile. The kind that hides a storm. "You star right," I said softly, my fingers trembling around the coffee mug. "I am just the ant." He looked confused for half a second. Then he shrugged and went back to joking with his friends. I took a deep breath. I wanted to shout. I wanted to throw the mug. I wanted him to feel even a fraction of this humiliation. But I didn't. I swallowed it. Because that's what I do. I smile. I nod. I plan. Later, when everyone was distracted by dessert, I found a quiet corner. I pressed my hands to my face. The sting of betrayal burned. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them, the way he didn't even pause to consider me. I had always been the backbone. Invisible maybe, but strong, and he didn't see it. I could hear him laughing again, across the room. My chest tightened, rage and heartbreak tangled into something heavy, almost suffocating. "Why does it hurt so much?" I whispered to myself. Because it wasn't just words. It was recognition. I mattered so much to him, and yet, I didn't. Not really, not in the way I thought. I replayed it in my mind, over and over, the casual tone, the laughter, the way the room seemed to shrink around me, everyone else oblivious, enjoying pancakes and mimosas, while I felt invisible. I thought about all the nights I spent crying quietly after he hung up on me, all the times I put his needs above my own, and he called me just the ant. It hurt. God, it hurt. But anger followed fast. Sharp, slicing, electric. I could feel it spreading through my veins. "This isn't how it ends," I told myself. "This isn't the story. Not yet." When I looked at him again, smiling, carefree, surrounded by people who adored him, I realized something terrifying and exhilarating. I could be more than the ant. I would be more than the ant. "Enjoy the brunch," I whispered under my breath. "Because things are about to change." I finished my coffee, not spilling a drop this time. Every sip tasted like fuel. Fuel for the plan forming in my mind. Quiet, meticulous, patient. I would make him see me, really see me, and when that moment came, he would know exactly what it meant to reduce someone to a title. For now, I smiled. I smiled while my heart cracked, smiled while the storm inside me raged, smiled while I plotted. Because smiling is my weapon, and patience is my ally. I walked back to the table, calm, composed, laughing with him, playing the part he wrote for me. Just the ant. But inside, I was already elsewhere, somewhere far beyond brunch, beyond laughter, beyond him, somewhere I was no longer just a title. And the words that broke me, they would be the ones that built me. I stopped showing up. Not because I didn't care, not because I didn't love him, but because I needed to see clearly, from the sidelines. I watched his life, my brother's life, like a movie I wasn't allowed to be part of. The house he built, the wife he adored, the kids he bragged about. Everyone laughed with him, praised him, everyone except me. I was invisible. "Are you okay?" my friend asked one night over coffee. I nodded, half smile. "Yeah, I sup fine." But I wasn't, not fine, not even close. The words he'd thrown at me at brunch, they kept replaying. Just the ant. I scribbled in my journal every night. Every insult, every slight, every ache, every moment I'd been brushed aside, every time my heart had been ignored. I can still believe he said that. I whispered aloud to the empty room, pen hovering over paper. Just, the ant, like I didn't matter at all. My cat twitched her ears. Indifferent, she didn't understand. Nobody did, and that hurt more than his words ever could. Friends tried, they called, they texted. He doesn't mean it like that. You you're overreacting. He loves you. I heard nothing. I only heard him, that stupid, careless laugh, that sharp phrase, that dismissal. And then, slowly, something inside me shifted. I realized invisibility wasn't weakness. It was clarity. I saw everything. His patterns. His little hypocrisies. The way he flaunted the kids' achievements but ignored the small things I did for them. The way he assumed I'd always be there, a shadow, ready to support, ready to forgive, ready to vanish when convenient. I started noticing the cracks, the moments no one else saw, the wife's subtle eye rolls when he bragged, the children's glances when I offered guidance, the way they listened to me differently than him. I wrote it all down: names, dates, behaviors, observations. My journal became a map, a blueprint. One night, I whispered into the darkness. I once bet beg anymore. I once bet stand in the background. Not for him, not for anyone. The anger that had burned after brunch had morphed. Sharpened, focused. Determination. I didn't need apologies. I didn't need recognition. I would take it, strategically, silently. I started showing up in small ways, quietly, offering help where it mattered, saving conversations, giving advice, making moments count, but always unseen, and yet I could feel the subtle shifts. The children looked at me differently. My brother started noticing the absences. The distance. I watched him fumble in ways I never had. For the first time I saw him vulnerable, human, flawed, and for the first time I realized power didn't have to scream. It could whisper. I closed my journal one night, chest tight, a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. This is just the beginning, I said. A plan began forming. Small, quiet steps, subtle nudges. I would reclaim what he had taken for granted. My time, my presence, my influence, and yes, the most important thing of all, his children. They looked to me without realizing it, listened to me, trusted me, and I would make sure that trust counted. I started leaving little things. Notes, gifts, moments of attention that he overlooked. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, just presence, my presence. And I watched as it started to matter. You always notice, don't you? My niece said one afternoon, tugging my sleeve. I smiled. Sometimes I try. Why? She asked. I didn't answer. Couldn't. Not yet. The plan needed patience, timing, subtlety. I had learned that invisibility could be a weapon, a lens, a way to see everything without being seen, and I would use it. Every observation, every detail, every slight, it would all build to something undeniable. By the end of that week, I realized I wasn't hurt anymore. Not the same way, not broken. I was ready. Ready to move from shadow to power, ready to step into a role no one could define for me, ready to make him see me, truly see me. And most importantly, ready to take what I wanted, not out of spite, out of justice, out of truth, out of the quiet, unshakable love I had always given, now turned into force. I was invisible no more. I started small. Quiet steps, careful movements. No one needed to know. Need help with your math? I asked my niece one afternoon, hovering by the kitchen table. She glanced up, surprised. Sure, Auntie. I sat down, pencil in hand, explained fractions like it mattered, really mattered. Her eyes lit up when she finally understood. Thanks, she whispered. My chest clenched. That one word, one simple soft thanks, and I felt something shift inside me. A warmth, a tug I hadn't expected. Of course, I said, smiling. I said, I'm always here if you need me. I watched them, observed them, listened. Their parents were present, technically, physically, but often distracted, busy with work, with their social lives, with appearances, not really seeing, not really hearing. I noticed the little things. The way my nephew hesitated before asking a question at dinner, afraid it might be a bother. The way my niece lingered in the doorway, seeking approval silently. No one gave them the time. No one, except me. I started volunteering. School events. bake sales, homework clubs. Little by little, I carved a place where I belonged, not just as the aunt who visited occasionally, but as someone they could rely on, someone consistent, someone present. "You're always here," my nephew said one afternoon, leaning against me after soccer practice. "I like being here," I said, brushing the sweat from his forehead. "You guys are important to me." He smiled shyly. "You set you're different." Different. That word lodged in my chest. It was both comforting and dangerous. They didn't know yet. They didn't see the storm forming. Each hug, each whispered "thank you, Auntie," planted a seed I watered carefully, not just for them, but for me, for what I was building. At home, I scribbled notes, observations, patterns, small details about who they listened to, who they confided in, what made them happy, what made them wary. Every interaction became data, every smile a clue, every tear a guide. "Can you come to my recital?" my niece asked one evening. I nodded immediately, wouldn't miss it for the world. Inside my mind ticked. Every event, every moment, every connection was a step, a subtle shift in their hearts, a preparation for the storm to come. I loved them. I genuinely did. But love and revenge aren't enemies. They can coexist. I was learning to balance both, to nurture and to strategize at the same time. "Why do you care so much?" my nephew asked one night after I helped him with a school project. I paused, smiled softly. "Because someone has to. Because I want to." He looked at me like he understood, but didn't question further. That trust, that small, fragile trust, it made my pulse quicken. I started noticing the cracks in their parents' attention, the forgotten lunches, the missed events, the distracted conversations. My brother laughed with his friends, while I caught the little disappointments in the kids' eyes. Every oversight was an opening, every neglect, a gap, and I slipped quietly into it, a shadow turning into light. Slowly, carefully. I held my tongue, never letting my intentions show.
Not yet.
Patience was my ally. Every day I cultivated influence. Every small act of attention, every laugh shared, every moment noticed, it was all part of the plan. At night, I wrote in my journal, "Love them, protect them, build trust, wait, everything else will follow." It wasn't just about seeing them. It was about planting roots, making them remember me not as just the aunt who visits, but as someone essential, someone reliable, someone indispensable. One evening my niece hugged me tightly. "I'm glad you're here," she whispered. I held her close, heart aching with genuine affection, and the thrill of possibility. "Me too," I murmured. Love and strategy, intertwined, a delicate balance, but I had learned it, I had to. Because the storm was coming, and when it did, I wanted to be the one they ran to. Not him, not his wife, me. And every seed I planted now would bloom when the time was right. I smiled softly, brushing hair from my niece's forehead. "Just a little longer," I whispered to myself. And in the quiet, I felt power. Patient, silent, growing. I was ready. It didn't take long for the first cracks to show. "Sometimes I feel like I sit in drowning," my brother Sep's wife said one afternoon, voice trembling, her hands fidgeted with the hem of her blouse. "There's Sep's so much to manage and he doesn't notice." I nodded, silent, letting her words settle between us. "You start doing the best you can," I said softly. "It's Sep's okay to admit it feels like too much." She looked at me like I was a lifeline, and I realized I was, not intentionally, at least not yet, but my presence mattered. Quietly, subtly, it mattered. Meanwhile, my brother strutted through his social circles, bragging about the perfect life he'd built. "Kids are amazing. House, wife, everything's ideal," he said one evening, laughing with friends. His eyes never met mine. He never saw me. He never saw the small chaos he ignored. I smiled, just a fraction. Because I did see. The children began to open up to me in ways they never did with him or his wife. "I had a nightmare last night," my niece whispered one evening as we sat on the couch, her small fingers clutching mine. "Do you want to tell me about it?" I asked, careful, patient. She nodded, and slowly she spoke. Fear of monsters under the bed, fear of letting people down, secrets she never mentioned at home. I listened, truly listened. "Why don't you tell Mom and Dad?" I asked gently. "They're busy," she said simply. You You understand. I swallowed, warmth and pain twisting in my chest. They trusted me, and he didn't see it. My nephew started too. He shared dreams, little victories at school, fears he hid. He asked my opinion. He wanted guidance, and I gave it tenderly, with precision. Do you think I could try out for the team? He asked one night, eyes wide. Of course, I said, smiling. You said be great. I said I'll help you practice if you want. He grinned, a light shining in his eyes. And I felt that quiet, thrilling power being the anchor, the refuge, the one they turned to when the people who should have been there weren't. Every laugh I shared, every whispered conversation, every hug became a quiet sting to him, though he didn't know it yet. He remained oblivious, bragging and boasting, thinking everything was perfect. I watched him, studying, observing his overconfidence. He thought control was about appearances, about loud declarations and social validation. He didn't see that the foundation of influence was quieter, subtler, emotional. Invisible until it wasn't. Why do they like you so much? He asked one evening, casually, while checking his phone. I didn't answer. I smiled politely. Maybe they just feel seen, I said softly, and walked away. I could feel it. The more I gave, the more he lost. Not in a dramatic confrontation, not in an argument or public exposure. He lost control in the spaces he ignored. In the trust, the affection, the bond he assumed was untouchable. Revenge doesn't always need confrontation. I was learning that. Sometimes it's being irreplaceable where no one expected it. Quietly, strategically, invisibly. Can we build a fort? My niece asked one rainy afternoon, dragging blankets from the closet. Absolutely, I said, my heart swelling. We still make it the best fort ever. We built it in the living room, laughter echoing softly against walls that had never held joy like this under his roof. He didn't notice. His wife didn't notice. Only I did. And it mattered. I took notes. Of course. Patterns, observations, subtle reactions, how they responded to small gestures, how he overlooked them, how he underestimated me. Every smile they shared with me was a piece of power quietly claimed. Every secret they entrusted to me was a seed planted. One night, after tucking them in, my nephew whispered, "Thanks for always listening." I kissed his forehead, whispering back, "Always, that's what family is for." And in that moment, I felt a quiet triumph. It was intoxicating. The cracks in the mask were growing, not visible to the world, not even to him yet, but they existed. And I was inside them, shaping them, feeding them, waiting. Because he could brag, boast and parade the image of perfection all he wanted. But the truth, the bond, the loyalty, the genuine love was slipping from his fingers. And I was the one holding it now. Invisible, yes, but indispensable. And that I realized was far more powerful than any confrontation. Nights were the hardest. The house was quiet, the children asleep, and I sat alone with my thoughts. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was sharp. Was I betraying him? I asked myself that constantly. Was this closeness with the kids a weapon, or a sanctuary? I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, I whispered to the darkness, tracing my journal with a finger. Memories rushed back, the sacrifices I had made, the ignored birthdays, the endless times my advice had been dismissed, the ridicule, the casual words that cut deeper than knives, just the ant. I pressed my hands to my face. The guilt was suffocating, yet underneath it, a fire burned. Anger, yes, but also clarity. My plan wasn't cruelty. It was justice, precise, poetic. I remembered my niece asking me quietly, "Why do you always help me, Auntie?" I swallowed hard. "Because someone has to," I said softly, "and because I care." She nodded, trusting me without reservation. That trust, it made the weight of my conscience almost unbearable. Love and strategy tangled together inside me. The children's laughter echoed in my mind. The shy smiles, the whispered secrets, every word they shared, every hand they held out to me. It was both a balm and a weapon. I thought of my nephew asking, late one evening, "Do you think Mom and Dad would notice if I needed help?" "They would," I lied gently. "But sometimes people are too busy to see it. That's okay. You can always come to me." And they did. And I did. But with every hug, every bedtime story, every word of advice, the guilt gnawed at me. I was carving a place in their hearts that should have belonged to their parents. And yet, I couldn't stop, because their parents, the ones who should have been everything, were blind, busy, distracted, too self-absorbed to notice. I wrote it all down in my journal, late at night, the fears, the dreams, the tiny revelations, every small victory, every little bond formed, every whisper of trust. I documented it like evidence, but also as a lifeline to myself. This isn't spit betrayal, I told myself one night, rocking in the empty living room. This is recognition. This is protection. This is love. But love can hurt. And it did. Every stolen smile, every secret shared with me instead of them, every small laugh at school events without their parents' attention, it cut, it burned, it tore at my heart. Yet the ache strengthened me. It reminded me why I had started, why I had stayed, why I would endure the emotional storm I had stirred inside myself. I remembered the words my brother had thrown at me months ago, just the ant. And now I knew the truth. I wasn't just the ant. I was indispensable, invisible, yes, but central, essential, loved in ways he had never realized. I closed my journal, exhaling slowly. Guilt lingered like smoke, but beneath it was determination. I would show him what he lost. Not with rage, not with shouting, but with quiet truth, poetic justice. I stood at the window, looking out at the dark street. The storm of emotions inside me mirrored the night sky, turbulent, restless, but alive. Tomorrow, I whispered to myself. Tomorrow they shall see. The children stirred in their beds, small sounds that tugged at my heart. I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling them through the walls, through the silence, through everything. I love you, I whispered softly. Not as a weapon, not yet, but as a promise, a shield. And in that fragile, conflicted love, I found my strength. The guilt would always linger, the pain would always sting, but it was worth it. Every sleepless night, every doubt, every emotional wound, it was all preparation. Because when the time came, he would understand. Not because I told him, not because I screamed, but because the bond, the love, the loyalty, it would be undeniable. And I would survive this storm. I had to. For them. For me. For justice. I began to move quietly, deliberately. Want to come over after school? I asked my niece one afternoon, holding a stack of board games. Her eyes lit up. Really, can I? Of course, I said, smiling. We still have so much fun. It started with little things. Play dates, story time, baking sessions, simple gestures, but each one planted a seed, a sense of stability, a sense of choice, a sense of me in their lives. Can we make cupcakes? My nephew asked, bouncing in his seat. Absolutely, I said, tying on an apron. And you can decorate them however you like. As I watched them laugh and argue over sprinkles, I documented it all, every smile, every hug, every whispered thank you, Auntie. I kept notes in my journal, observations, patterns, moments they would remember, moments that would bind them to me in ways my brother couldn't understand. I introduced them to my world, small life lessons, things their parents neglected. Always think before you speak, I told my niece gently when she shouted at her brother. Your words have power. Heaven knows he had never taught them that. He was too busy showing off the perfect image of their family while leaving the substance unattended. Why do you care so much? My nephew asked one day, as we planted flowers in my garden. I paused, hands in soil, dirt under my nails, because someone should, because you deserve it. They trusted me more every day. I could see it in their eyes, in the way they ran to me for advice, in the way they shared their fears, dreams, and secrets. And I never pushed, never forced, just held space, quietly, patiently. Meanwhile, my brother remained blind. His arrogance made him deaf to the subtle shifts around him. He bragged to friends, posted pictures of smiling children and a perfect house, oblivious to the cracks forming beneath the surface. One evening he passed me in the hallway. You're here again? He asked, half curious, half annoyed. Yes, I said softly, meeting his eyes for a fraction of a second. Just helping. He nodded dismissively and moved on, unaware that with every interaction, with every game, every story, I was pulling the children closer to me, closer than he ever had been. Confrontation would ruin everything. Elegance is lost in shouting matches. I needed patience, subtlety, control. The law would become my ally. I began preparing quietly. Legal documents, research, consulting lawyers. Everything needed to be airtight. I couldn't just take them. I had to prove that I was already their safe harbor, that their home, their parents' neglect, had created a void I had already filled. You think we could ever live somewhere else? My niece asked one evening, curled up against me with her book. I hugged her tightly. Home is just a house, I whispered. It's where you you're loved, where you you're safe, where someone notices you. She smiled sleepily. Then we stir home, Auntie. And in that moment, I knew the plan was working. Not because of force, not because of threats, not because of confrontation, but because love, consistency, and care are impossible to ignore. Each playdate, each lesson, each story time, each late-night conversation, it was a claim, quiet, invisible, but undeniable. I watched my brother struggle unknowingly to maintain control. He didn't notice the void he'd created. He didn't notice their growing attachment to me, and that was the beauty of it. He was still the perfect father in public, but privately he had lost something essential, something he didn't even realize he was losing. Why don't they listen to me like they listen to you? He asked once, frustration leaking through the laughter he tried to fake at dinner. I only smiled, calm, composed. Maybe they just feel seen, I said quietly. That was all I needed to say. He didn't understand yet, he wouldn't, not until the law reflected what his negligence had already shown, that I was their safe harbor, their family. And the best part? I didn't need to push. I didn't need to demand. I simply created space for them to choose me, to trust me, to love me, and when the time came, the law would see what their hearts already knew. I closed my journal that night, pen heavy with notes. The plan was no longer a thought. It was in motion. Precise, calculated, irresistible. I glanced at the children sleeping peacefully, their hands still intertwined. I pressed a hand to my chest. Quiet satisfaction. Power, subtle but undeniable. I was turning the tables. And soon, he would finally see. The day came. I didn't storm in. I didn't yell. I didn't demand. Calm certainty guided me instead. You called me just the aunt, I said, voice steady, holding the stack of letters, journals, and school records in my hands. He laughed at first, a short, dismissive bark of disbelief. You can he said, leaning back in his chair. No one can just take them from me. They stir my kids. They stare children, I said, letting the word linger, and they deserve someone who actually sees them, who listens, who cares. His smirk faltered, confusion flickering across his face. I placed the first letter on the table. Evidence of his neglect, missed parent-teacher meetings, forgotten birthdays, ignored homework crises. I didn't realize he began, stumbling over words, but I cut him off gently. You didn't set notice, I said, because you were too busy being perfect in front of everyone else. But they noticed, and I was here, every day, every moment. I handed him the journals, observations, patterns, notes of laughter, tears, whispered fears. I didn't hide anything. He needed to see it all. The children, once silent observers, now stepped forward. My niece took my hand first. Auntie, she said softly, I like it when you help me, when you listen, when you care. I want to stay with you. Her brother nodded, eyes wide but firm. Me too, you notice us. They don't sit. I watched him, the man who had always been proud, smug, untouchable, freeze. Shock rippled across his face. Then regret. Then fear. No, he whispered, voice tight. You can Yes, I said simply. Calm. I can. And the law will recognize what Youssef already shown them, that Youssef failed to be the parent they need. He ran a hand through his hair, face pale, the facade crumbled. I saw the arrogance slip, replaced with vulnerability he'd never allowed anyone to witness. You can't take them, he said again, desperation creeping in. They're not being taken, I corrected gently. They're choosing, and they've chosen me. He looked at the children, seeing their small hands gripping mine, their trusting eyes, and for the first time, I saw him confronted with his own failures. You don't understand, he stammered. I understand perfectly, I said, stepping closer. I understood the moment you called me just the aunt. Stepping, I understood when you ignored their needs. I understood when your pride blinded you to what really mattered. And now, the children understand too. Tears welled in my niece's eyes. We just want someone who notices us, she said. Yes, I whispered. Someone who sees you for who you are. Someone who loves you, all of you. My brother's face fell. The weight of his neglect settled on his shoulders. I didn't need to say more. The silence said everything. Shock, regret, fear, dancing across his features like shadows. I felt vindicated not just for myself but for them. For the children who deserved a safe, loving, attentive guardian. For the ones who had trusted me when no one else had. You've really done this, he muttered, voice cracking. Yes, I said, voice soft but firm. Quietly, patiently, carefully, I sep done what you could instead. He looked down, ashamed, small. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The truth, laid bare, was more powerful than any words of triumph. You sev won? He whispered. No, I said, holding his gaze. Not one, righted or wrong, given them what they deserve. That seps all. The children leaned against me, safe, secure, loved, and I knew in that moment that my plan had succeeded, not with rage, not with shouting, but with care, patience, and unwavering presence. You shall see, I said softly, glancing at them, the love, attention, guidance. It stups not just about me, it stups about what you sev always deserved, and I still be here, always. He nodded silently, unable to argue. Words failed him. Evidence, truth, and the children's voices spoke louder than anything he could claim. I exhaled slowly, tension leaving my body. Quiet satisfaction, quiet triumph, quiet justice. The revelation was complete. And in that silence I knew something else. I had reclaimed what had been denied to me for so long and given the children a home in ways he never could. I stepped back, letting the moment settle. He had seen, they had spoken. The scales were balanced. And finally justice, silent, precise, undeniable, had its day. The adoption was finalized. It wasn't a battle, not with shouting, not with threats, just quiet, deliberate action. The law saw what I had always known. I was their safe harbor, their constant, their family. My brother could no longer dismiss me as just the aunt. Not now, not ever. I watched him sit across from me at the table. His hands clenched, jaw tight. I never thought, he stammered, voice barely above a whisper. I know, I said calmly, meeting his gaze, but it doesn't matter anymore. They have me now, and I said'll give them what they deserve. He swallowed hard, eyes flicking to the children. My niece smiled shyly, clutching my hand. My nephew peeked from behind my shoulder, eyes bright, trusting. They were mine now in every meaningful way. You've really done this, he muttered, finally seeing the reality he had ignored for so long. Yes, I said softly. I did what you couldn't set. I cared when you turned away. I listened when you ignored. I loved when you were absent. He looked down, shame and regret settling on his shoulders like a weight he couldn't lift. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Words failed him. Actions spoke louder. His neglect, his absence, had already been judged, silently, profoundly. Can you forgive me? He asked finally, voice raw, unsteady. I paused. For a moment I considered the answer. The hurt, the humiliation, the years of being invisible to him, and then I spoke. I forgive you, I said, and it was instead at false. But forgiveness does instead erase the past. It does instead undo what they missed. What I said had to build from nothing. He nodded, tears threatening, but the truth was clear. The balance had shifted, publicly, quietly, irrevocably. Friends and family began to notice. At birthday parties, school recitals, weekend trips, my presence was undeniable. I laughed with them. I guided them. I celebrated milestones my brother had missed. I can believe how involved you are, one family friend whispered. I thought he was doing all this. I smiled politely, heart steady. The irony was intoxicating. He had boasted, he had paraded perfection, but the truth was undeniable now. Dedication, presence, love, those weren't things you could fake. One evening, after a school performance, my brother pulled me aside. I see it now, he admitted quietly. I see what I lost. Yes, I said softly. You see it, but it seps too late. They have stability, love, and attention now. All the things you promised but never gave. He exhaled slowly, shoulders sagging. Silence stretched between us. Heavy, charged. The children ran past, giggling, showing off handmade awards. My niece leaned against me. Did you see, Auntie? I got first place. I lifted her into my arms, smiling. I saw, sweetheart. I knew you could do it. Her brother grabbed my hand. Thanks for helping me practice, he said, eyes shining. You believed in me. I kissed the top of his head. Always that's my job. And I felt it. The quiet power, the satisfaction, the undeniable justice. I had claimed what had been taken for granted. Heartbreak, humiliation, invisibility, all forged into strength, love, and justice. My scars were visible. But they no longer marked weakness. They marked survival, triumph. Evidence that I had endured the words, the dismissals, the invisible life, and transformed it into something meaningful, profound, enduring. One night after tucking them in, my nephew whispered, "You subber the best, Auntie. I subber glad you subber ours." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "And I'm glad you're mine," I whispered back. Later, alone, I reflected. The poetic justice was complete. Not with cruelty, not with vengeance, but with unwavering presence, patience, and love. He had lost nothing I hadn't already given them. And yet, in losing the illusions of his perfection, he had learned the weight of absence. "You did the impossible," he said one evening, quietly, almost reverently. "I did what was necessary," I corrected gently. "Not for me. For them, for the children who deserved a guardian, a family, a home." The balance had shifted. Silence carried more power than any argument ever could. And in that quiet, I found deep satisfaction. The milestones, the laughter, the homework sessions, the whispered bedtime conversations, all of it marked my victory, not in vengeance but in presence. Invisible no longer, indispensable now. I had taken heartbreak and humiliation, and shaped them into something beautiful, into proof that love and justice could coexist. I remembered the words that started it all, just the ant. And now, they were meaningless. I was the anchor, the refuge, the center of a family that finally knew what it meant to be truly seen. He apologized again, quietly, sincerely. "I'm sorry," he said. "I never realized." I nodded, calm. "I know, but they have what they needed. That's what matters." The children thrived under my care. Their laughter filled rooms that had once been empty. Their joy, their trust, their smiles, all a living testament to my journey from invisibility to empowerment. I had survived the storm. I had endured the betrayal. I had transformed pain into love, invisibility into presence, humiliation into triumph. And as I watched them sleep, safe, content, and cherished, I realized I had done more than reclaim what was mine. I had rewritten our story. Karmic justice, silent and undeniable, had finally arrived. And this time it was perfect. Life after the adoption wasn't spent perfect. Never is. "Are you sure about this?" my brother asked one morning, voice tight but calm as he handed me the car keys. "Yes," I said, taking them. "I've always been sure, and they've thriving. That's what matters." He sighed, leaning against the doorway. "I just wish things were different." "Different how?" I asked softly. "You had every chance to be here, to be present. You weren't set, and now they know who really sees them." His silence said more than words ever could. The children ran past, laughing, chasing each other across the kitchen floor. My niece's curls bounced as she shouted, "Auntie, watch me." I caught her in my arms. "I see you, sweetheart. I always do." My nephew tugged on my sleeve. "Can we go to the park today?" "Of course," I said, smiling. Let's make it an adventure." And it was every day became a tapestry of ordinary miracles. Homework completed together, scraped knees bandaged with comfort and patience, bedtime stories whispered into the dark. They trusted me utterly, completely, and I loved them with a depth I had never known before. There were challenges, messy mornings, arguments, tears over forgotten chores or misread feelings, but through it all the bond only grew stronger. "You sir always here," my niece said one evening, leaning against me after a long day, "even when everyone else is in stet." "I'll always be here," I whispered. "You can count on me always." Her brother hugged my waist. "You stepper the best, Auntie. I don't know what we step'd do without you." The words sank into me, warm, healing, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. For the first time, I felt fully seen, not as just the aunt, not as the background character in someone else's story, but as a force, a guardian, a family. My brother existed on the edges now. He smiled at their achievements. He attended a few events, but the moments that mattered, the whispered worries, the scraped knees, the late-night confessions, he had already missed, and in their eyes, I was the constant. The safe harbor, the one who mattered. "Can I come with you tomorrow?" My nephew asked as I packed lunches one morning. "Of course," I said, heart swelling. "We shall go together, and I shall show you something new." He grinned, and for a moment the past, the hurt, the humiliation, the invisibility faded into the distance. I had reclaimed agency, dignity, purpose. I was no longer a bystander, no longer invisible. Every scraped knee I tended, every story I read, every lesson I imparted was a mark of my triumph. "Yuseb changed everything," my brother said one evening, voice quieter than I sept ever heard it. "I can set believe how different it is." "Yes," I said softly. "It seps different because I chose to be present, because I love them, and because I refuse to be invisible any longer." He nodded, acceptance mingled with regret. Not every wound can be healed, not every loss reversed, but some truths are undeniable. His time as their anchor had passed. Mine had begun. Even friends and distant relatives noticed. "It's Sep's incredible how you Sep built this life with them," one aunt whispered watching me braid my niece Sep's hair. "You Sept are their world now." "I am," I said simply. "And that Sep's exactly where I want to be." Night fell, and I tucked them into bed, listening to their soft breathing. My niece murmured, "Thank you, Auntie, for everything." "You don't have to thank me," I said. "I shall always be here." Her brother whispered, "You Sid are our hero." I pressed a kiss to his forehead. "No, I am just someone who stayed when it mattered most." In the quiet, I reflected. I had transformed heartbreak into resilience, humiliation into strength, invisibility into presence. Each scar I carried was now a testament, not to weakness, but to survival and triumph. I looked around our home, the walls echoing with laughter, the air heavy with warmth. The family I had fought for, quietly, patiently, strategically, now thrived, and I thrived with them. My brother, once a towering figure in their lives, now existed on the margins, a shadow of what could have been. He watched quietly, as love and attention flowed from me effortlessly, and in that observation, there was reckoning. I had not sought cruelty. I had not sought revenge for the sake of it. I had sought justice, poetic, precise, and profoundly satisfying, and in the eyes of the children, in the rhythm of our days, I had found it. The final chapter of invisibility had closed, and in its place was life defined by strength, love, justice, and the family I had earned. I whispered to myself, as I watched them drift to sleep, "We sip made it, we sip safe, we sip seen, and we are unstoppable." The shadows of the past remained, yes, but they no longer controlled me. I had risen, from heartbreak, from neglect, from invisibility. I had risen, and now nothing could take away what we had built together. I was their constant, their guardian, their family. And that was enough. Years later, I watched from the porch, a mug of coffee warming my hands, the morning sun casting long shadows across the yard. My brother is there, knees bent, trying to teach my nephew how to ride a bike. He smiles nervously, glancing at me once in a while. The weight of his past failings is in that look, the hesitance, the awareness, the quiet guilt. "You've got this, buddy," he calls, voice high with effort. "I'm trying, Uncle," my nephew replies, laughter mingled with concentration. I sip my coffee, a soft smile tugging at my lips. I don't feel anger anymore. Not really. That chapter closed years ago. The children wobble and laugh. My niece cheering from the sidelines. "You can do it. Keep pedaling." I hear the encouragement, the joy, the trust, and I feel pride. Quiet, unshakable pride. "You're getting better," my brother says, finally letting go for a few feet. His grin is awkward but genuine. I know he's aware of the time he lost, the moments he can never reclaim. I call softly, careful, don't lean too far forward. He nods, grateful for the guidance he should have had himself. The children fall into my embrace afterward, triumphant, breathless. "Did you see me?" my nephew shouts. "I did it." "Yes, I saw." I say, lifting him into my arms. I knew you could. My niece twirls around, cheeks flushed. I want to try next. Of course, I tell her, brushing a loose curl from her face. We still take it slow. You still be amazing. I glance back at my brother. He steps sitting on the grass, leaning back on his hands, watching. Nervous. Respectful. A shadow of the man who once thought I was just the ant. I'm glad they have you, he says quietly, voice almost hesitant. I nod. Warmth in my chest. They do, and they always will. That's what matters. The scars remain. The memory of being dismissed, overlooked, invisible, still lingers in the corners of my mind. But now they're no longer wounds. They're proof that I endured, survived, and built something meaningful despite betrayal, neglect, and humiliation. You changed everything, he adds after a pause, almost to himself. Yes, I reply softly. I did, and it was instead easy. But every struggle, every sleepless night, every tear, worth it. He doesn't respond immediately. He just watches the children, laughing, playing, learning, thriving, and in that silence he knows the truth. I gave them the life he couldn't, the love he neglected, the attention he ignored. I kneel to adjust my niece's helmet, her small hands gripping mine. Ready? I ask. She nods vigorously. Yes, let's do it. And as we walk toward the driveway, I feel it, the culmination of years of patience, strategy, and love, not humiliation, not confrontation, but undeniable, living proof. You're amazing, my nephew says, eyes shining as I steady him on the bike. No, I whisper, brushing his hair back. We stir amazing, together. Later, as the sun dips lower, casting golden light across the yard, I stand back and watch. The children are happy, confident, loved, and I am their mother, their mentor, their protector. I meet my brother's eyes briefly. There's no anger there, no bitterness, just acknowledgement, a recognition of what he lost and what I earned. The truest revenge, I realize, isn't in punishment. It isn't in confrontation. It isn't in making someone feel small. It's in building something indestructible, something enduring, something the world cannot take away. I love you, Auntie, my niece says suddenly, running into my arms. I love you too, I reply, holding her close. Always. My nephew joins, and for a moment, it's just us. Safe. Whole, united. The shadows of the past are still there. Yes, but they don't define me. They remind me how far I've come, how I transformed invisibility into presence, heartbreak into strength, humiliation into purpose. I take a deep breath, letting the peace settle in. Quiet pride, quiet victory. And in their laughter, their trust, their unshakable love, I see the life I fought for and the woman I became. No longer just the ant. I am everything they need, and that finally is more than enough.